and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me for tonight's episode is Mike Greene, Vice President of Artist and Label Services at ADA, a division of Warner Music Group. Mike is a 13-plus year music industry veteran who's held positions at Warner's ADA and Razor and Tie based in New York. In his current role as Vice President, Artist and Label Services at ADA, he oversees strategic digital marketing and audience development efforts for its label services partners and independent distributed labels. He also leads commercial relationships with TikTok, Meta, Snapchat, and YouTube. He's driven campaigns for artists like Macklemore, Central C, Peter Gabriel, Papa Roach, Big Frida, and plenty of others, and his work on trending songs from Dixie, Dylan Conrique, and Strange Fruits Music has been featured in Business Insider, Music Ally, and led to panel appearances at the annual Indie Week conference. So, Mike, lovely to have you on the podcast. How's it going? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Rachel. It's great to be here.
Are you ready for the first question?
Let's jump right in.
Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. On a personal note, I would definitely advocate for continuing to make time for, creative pursuits and as well as hobbies outside of the day job and daily work. For me, coincidentally, that was also related to music. Being a musician and playing in bands was something I was able to do in my 20s and still try to do a little bit as well. So that was super rewarding to be able to perform, write songs, record, go on tour a bit, and was also able to really learn a lot, I think, and get a little bit of that artist side perspective of the industry and learn a lot of hands-on experience, from a marketing and from a digital marketing perspective as well, and in terms of growing, creating content and doing marketing for my bands and musical projects. And for me, that's just is very enriching, is very personally fulfilling, and also created, again, some balance with the day job. I think in the music industry, our jobs can become kind of our whole lives and our whole personalities. And sometimes the boundaries aren't always there from a personal standpoint or from a time standpoint. So really making time for those things that bring you enrichment and joy in life, whether that's playing music or sports or another hobby or passion you might have, spending time with family is definitely something worth making time for. On the professional side, I would encourage myself and others to advocate for yourself, to speak up for what you want, what you believe in, and to promote yourself. I would say in the industry too. That's definitely something that I'm working on every day. And I think in the music industry, it's very entrepreneurial industry. We have to take initiative. We have to bring ideas up and go see them through. We have to try new things. And those experiences and those wins, as well as those challenges, those learnings, give us the ability to, again, advocate for ourselves, whether that's with a supervisor or a manager, with a partner, with a client. We have to speak up for what we want, and we have to advocate for ourselves in order to grow.
Going back to what you said about like being in a band and that's helped you in your job, is that something that at the beginning you wanted to pursue full time? Is it something that you still think about too?
I would say it's definitely something that I still think about a little bit. The dream of being a rock star is not been totally diminished after all this time. But certainly it was my passion for playing music, and the DIY ethos of being able to build a little world around my music is what ultimately drove me into the industry. So yeah, it's still a little bit of a dream there, but again, I like to try to channel that creativity in everything I can do.
Well, you definitely have the connections to make it happen if if you ever wanna, go there. All
Call up some
right.
of my A&R friends.
Exactly. Next question. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we all know that's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they can be good. So, what's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Everyone is just trying to figure it out. as we're going along. And I don't know if that's exclusive to the music industry or if that's just a bit of life in general, but I know that for myself as well as people entering the industry, there you can put a lot of pressure on yourself to know what your 5 or 10 year plan looks like, or feel like you need to have it figured out from day one and have a really linear path. And I think the truth is, as I've spent more time in the industry and gotten older and expanded my network too, and just met more people, you kind of realize that we're all just kind of figuring it out as we go. And again, in our industry, it changes constantly. And so I think that forces us, on one hand, we have to be reactive, but we have to be reflective as well, and comfortable with change, and being okay with, maybe I don't have it all figured out, or maybe what I used to know, it doesn't apply anymore. And hopefully, that's something that, again, people trying to come into the industry or otherwise can, that can provide a little relief and take some of the pressure off needing to have it all figured out from day one. And maybe a part two to that too is that, as we're here on this podcast, I think people are more open to sharing information and speaking and meeting with one another than it might seem from the outside. Music industry might not be the easiest one to break into, but I found that here I am today. People like to talk about themselves. They like to share knowledge, talk about their accomplishments, pontificate around the future of our industry, or just where they might be headed. So again, it might seem kind of scary or intimidating at first, but sometimes just reaching out is all it takes. And we're all just people here, again, trying to figure it out and make the most of it as we go along.
I think that's a great point about, we're all just surviving. And that's been a common theme on this podcast. A lot of people have answered this question by saying, we're all just figuring out as we go. Do you have any particular project or experience that comes to mind when you're thinking back on your career so far where you were like, I truly have no idea how to approach this? And how did you kind of go about that, figure it out?
There's definitely been, I think, working on the indie side, a lot of situations where, I had to roll up my sleeves or expand the scope of my job a little bit. In 2018, I took sort of a sidestep over from ADA to relaunch Asylum Records, another Warner label. And with that role too, not only was I taking on digital marketing, but I was also taking on commerce responsibilities. So pitching all the DSPs, understanding the operational nuances of each of those platforms, and building relationships in new areas as well. So that was one where I sort of had to just jump right in. I certainly had some transferable experience, and some relationships just from being adjacent to that space on the marketing side, but really just needed to kind of jump in and rely on my colleagues and rely on my friends, and for introductions, for tips and tricks, bits of advice along the way, but also, ultimately being confident in myself, in my relationship building abilities, in my communication abilities, and in my technical abilities as well, to be like, what, this isn't what I'm trained on, but I can jump in, I can get this done. And ultimately that's really valuable experience that I think has helped contribute to my well-roundedness, I like to think.
And clearly it worked out. You're still here, still thriving. Next question. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether it was for an industry conference, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question, and what would be your answer?
One thing that I think about a lot, especially in my current position, is what skill sets or what mindsets are going to be required for artists and artist teams to be successful going into the future. What I'm trying to answer in my current role, but again, as I look ahead, I think understanding of social platforms, artist audiences is going to continue to be paramount, as well as the ability to execute digital campaigns, create content, drive impressions in UGC efficiently, really being skilled technical digital operators and fan engagement strategists, I think is ultimately what's going to keep teams successful. With that as well, we talk a lot about data and analytics, understanding where our audience is, what's working, what's not working, and being able to proactively make adjustments along the way. Fans are going to continue to be increasingly important and provide tips and direction for where artists and teams, should be going. We're not in a one-way world anymore. It's a constant conversation and feedback loop between artists and their audiences, and we need to integrate that into our campaigns. And the last tip I would say to that, which we've touched on the podcast, is just being comfortable with change, being adaptable, and being open to experimentation. The rule book has been thrown out the window. I think a lot of us are, again, trying to figure out what works and taking it day by day, and being able to have that open mindset, open to experimentation and comfortable with change is just going to be completely necessary in order to move forward in what is an ever-changing space.
Yeah, speaking of change, before we close the episode out, where do you see the business going in 5 to 10 years? Do you think that it's all digital? You think A&R is out the window? You think A&R is always going to be around?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I don't see in 5 to 10 years, some of these core aspects, A&R, maybe radio promotion. I don't see those going away entirely. I see those becoming potentially more specialized. I do see digital and fan engagement continuing to be the foundation of artist development. There's obviously been a lot of talk around AI right now, and even this
Mm.
week, artists pushing back on that. The cream is going to continue to rise to the top, but artists have more opportunity using digital tools to build those audiences and help build the engines that are going to ultimately propel them to prosperous careers.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining me tonight on the podcast. Pleasure to have you on. To everyone listening, stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where we interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.